everyone, and welcome to the PuzzleHR Summer Symposium. This session is AI in HR, harnessing the power of HR while managing the risks that are going to be associated with using AI specifically in the HR function. Before I introduce you to my co-hosts, we'll do a little housekeeping, all right? Do a little housekeeping. So we're absolutely taking questions. So pop your questions in. I'm not sure if it's a Q&A box or a chat, but if there's a Q&A box or a chat, just pop your questions in there and we'll answer those in the chat. It's hard to kind of talk and read those things, but we will just answer those in the chat. Without further ado, I'll introduce all of us. So I'm Chris Timmel, president of PuzzleHR. Started the company back in 2019 to take burden off of business folks' plates. We know how important HR is. We also know how difficult it is to get right. So we try to help companies stand up their HR function to drive business results. I'm joined today by my Vice President of Technology, Joe Dagger. Joe, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
He's actual intelligence. So Joe's our VP of Technology. Joe's had a very long career at another company, actually digitized really, digitized the HR function of a very large company before coming over here to Puzzle. So he's really, I think, uniquely positioned to talk to us a little bit about workflows versus AI and the AI function. And then many of you already know Brianna Grimes. She's our people and process technology manager, also on the tech team, master's degree in human resources from Austin, Texas. And of course, as many of you know, my co-host on our podcast, You Cannot Spell Horror Without HR. Grimes, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me back. It's awesome. I love doing these things with you.
This is going to be a fun one. So audience at home. So we got on a call last week and started talking about this topic, obviously. And then we just started spinning and going through all of the different, all the different risks and rewards, et cetera, of using AI. The purpose of this meeting, what I want you to take away from this, I think, is some kind of do's and do nots. Like we want you to think about AI and human resources and like things you should absolutely use it for and things you should definitely not use it for. So that said, that out of the way, we'll get started. Joe, last week you made a really good point talking about I have it written down here as the duality of AI, right? So the potential benefits and then some of the potential risks associated with using AI in the workplace, specifically in HR. Why don't we start the conversation there? What do you see?
Yeah, Chris, there's probably a lot we could cover there, and I'm sure we'll cover it as we go on. But I think, like anything else, AI comes with a stage one hype cycle that would have you believe lots of different things. First, that it's effortless. Second, that it will replace fill in the blank very quickly. There is, as with anything, there's some truth to that, but everything comes in the phases. There's a phase one hype cycle, then followed by the reality, and then followed by the mature stage that follows later. But I think with that comes some liability and some risk. Like any new technology, there is risk in running in too soon just because of all the hype. And it takes measured approaches, measured steps, and a very, I think, strategic way of aligning the use of these tools to real strategies that your company already has to accelerate the results that you already want. So I know we'll probably get a lot more into that as we go, but obviously this unique technology is obviously going to change the world. And that just means we need more caution and more measured steps going in to sort out what's real from what's not, and what the real risks of this are, because we're talking about information and putting information into servers across the internet. And HR is high stakes business. This is sensitive information by nature. This is counseling employees. This is employee engagement. And some of these tools are sycophants in that they will just validate whatever you say and tell you that anything you think is fine and that you're right. And that with that is a reduction of objectivity, at least in the early stages. And that can lead to echo chambers for employees and them not talking to real humans and real HR professionals. So I think it's going to be a fantastic accelerator for HR, just like it will for all parts of the world. But like anything else, we just got to be careful and not rush in.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. Grimes, you were talking about when we were having this conversation, you mentioned Joe mentioned the echo chamber, right? Like, so you're talking to an AI and it's, basically tells you how great you are, right? And tell us about how you feel or how you view some of those risks and opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think overall with the AI chatbots, it all comes down to the prompts, right? And what you're putting into the prompts. And I think people right now are kind of experimenting, and they first it was, oh, I'm gonna ask it questions about my job. I'm gonna ask it questions about like what does this really mean or summarize this for me. And it became kind of a learning tool. And I think you actually mentioned this when we chatted now, like the number one use is people are using the chat GPT functionality for like almost counseling, like, hey, I'm dealing with this emotion, or hey, I'm dealing with this at work, walk me through it. So now we're using it to kind of handle our day-to-day lives a little bit. And a lot of the programming, when you go to chat GPT, it's like, oh, great question, or I'm so glad you asked that. Which is awesome. It's nice, comforting. But at the same time, it's also it's going to kind of feed back what you put into it. There's a huge difference between asking it, hey, I just dealt with my boss today and this is how the conversation went. And, I need to struggle with some emotions that I'm feeling because I don't feel like I was wrong. Walk me through it. Versus, I hate my boss. What can I do to like retaliate? Or what can I do to file a claim? Those are two completely different questions about the same situation. So I think a lot of it just comes back to how are we using it? How do we anticipate our employees using it? And building in kind of those safe havens for how the data is going to be utilized for our employees.
Yeah, I think the statistic that I forget what the exact statistic was, but I think it was Wall Street Journal, New York Times, The Atlantic, one of the three. The number one use case for the LLMs on the market right now is counseling, right? So in lieu of a therapist, it's therapy GPT, which at least folks are seeking some help, but boy, that could be like you said, that could be pretty dangerous. I want to take a step back a little bit, and Joe, this is to you, because I think let's talk about exactly what AI actually is, right? Because I feel like sometimes folks get confused, maybe workflow management or process work, or RPA with AI. Can you tell us the difference?
Sure. Yeah. Specifically, I think that's the great promise of stage one applications of these tools, and they are transactional accelerators, is what I'd say, not a replacement for HR pros. But to your question, Chris, there is robotic process automation, which also had this huge hype cycle years ago when it came out, and it settled into a significantly useful reality, but one very different from the hype that was originally surrounding it. So. Really, the difference between RPA and true AI powered automation is that RPA can execute repetitively and without stopping a set of rigid structured instructions that don't vary. When any variation comes in or when it runs into something that's not in its program script, it stops. And that's where you have to bring in what's called the human in the loop. And the human has to decide what to do and then take it from there. The opportunity here is to take what RPA started, the automation of transactions, and now introduce decision making into it. learning decision making, meaning when an AI powered automation gets stuck, it might bring in the human and say, what do I do here? The human decides, and then the AI learns from that. Next time that comes up, it applies what it learned and it can do it itself. RPA bots don't do that. They stop every single time there's a variation in the script. So what you have here is a reduction in the need for the human in the loop over time, because they're teaching with every decision and every choice they make. The LLM or the automation learns that, stores it away in its brain, and next time that same thing comes up, it can handle it itself.
Awesome. So, which leads me to why the use of LLMs and AI in certain areas uh, of human resources can be dangerous, right? Can be problematic. Let's talk about the Workday case, right? So, I mean, that started a couple of years ago. I just read about it. It hit my feed, it hit my news feed like this weekend after we talked. I was reading up on it today, and so the the Workday is kind of getting in trouble because the AI learned learned the decisioning that the hiring managers, the recruiters were using to select candidates, and that LLM, I potentially paraphrasing, but that LLM learned bias, right? It learned, right? It learned who not to put forth, right? And now someone is bringing a lawsuit. EEOC, um, the EEOC is involved. I think they've got an ADEA claim out there, and I believe it's reaching class action. And Workday is right. And did I read right? Workday is being uh, required to hand over all of the names of the companies that use their automation, use their AI in their recruiting function. I think it's something that I saw. So that, yes, the AI learns, but if you don't have the right practices and behaviors to teach the AI, you're going to teach the AI bad things that can get you into trouble, right? So
Yeah, that's right, Chris. The way I think about it is, you can think of LLM, or the Chat GPTs, or these engines, as having they are what they ingest, they are what they eat. So whatever they're trained on, the biases that come through in that training are embedded into them. So, and that's one of the just many reasons for not rushing in here, because to properly deploy such a tool, you need to do a lot of data massaging, scrubbing, cleaning, and auditing to make sure that, for instance, to your point, it's not giving biased information. You make sure it takes in a broad range of content, so it's not inherently out of the gate biased because you only gave it one perspective of viewpoint or something like that. Because just as with humans making such mistakes in prejudice and lack of bias, the same legal liability comes into play here.
yeah,
Yeah, truly the AI is only as good as the programming and what it's learned behind it. And that's why I know some states like New York, for example, they've been using AI, or a lot of companies in New York have been using AI in recruiting for some time now. And they require independent bias audits that have to be done by the company. So yes, the AI may save you some time on the front end to do all of this, but we're creating ultimately more regulatory work on the back end for the average company that wants to do this. So I think a lot of people, and Joe, you said this earlier, like, it's easy to do and easy to learn and look at all this stuff. It is, but as the legal landscape kind of shakes out, as we all know, there's going to be some oversight. There's going to be some legalization and some, bills and stuff that are going to be passed to regulate this. And it's going to create more work on the back end. So yes, you may gain some efficiencies by jumping in now, but then you're going to have to go back and redo certain things or put in new checks and balances to regulate what you already put in. So treading carefully when you use AI for anything that has high risk as far as the EOC or bias, discrimination, any type of those decision-making factors is going to be really important for key leaders when they go to make this decision to include AI in their HR strategy. They really need to be considering, what does the legal landscape look like? Has it been hashed out? How willing are we to do this maybe 1, 2, or 3 iterations in because of the regulation that we already know is coming? California, New York, they're already talking about it. California already passed, or I think they passed the No Robo Bosses Act as part of one of their bills. We know there are going to be amendments coming to that as that shakes out. So a lot of legal stuff to really consider as business leaders make this decision.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Bias audit, certainly a best. I mean, I couldn't imagine. So, like, you know what? Let me take a step back. So, what questions do you think that HR leaders should be asking vendors before buying and deploying AI tools in their organizations?
There's a lot of them, I think, and they all come down to, they have their roots in the same things we probably always asked vendors who, especially in high stakes area like HR, where we're dealing with sensitive data, is a regular course of business and as the default. So, first on my mind is always, if you're talking to an AI vendor, it's accuracy and reliability. What have you done to make this a trustworthy source that's going to be free or close to free of hallucinations? Bias and compliance trust, we just talked about that. How do we know we can trust that it's not biased? How has it been trained? How did you stack the deck against this thing being biased when you were training your model? Data security, privacy. If you think of GDPR and how that has transformed the data landscape and the privacy landscape outside the US, and that is just now making its way into the US through California, as Brianna mentioned. But we are still struggling with making data private, data privacy absolute. We still have breaches. We're still learning to do it in an analog world, and now we're talking about this accelerator coming through and increasing the speed of scale by orders of magnitude. So it really is, what have you done to build security and privacy and transparency? What's the thing's source when it's giving me an answer? I can't just blindly trust it and go and use it, or there can be some liability or certainly risk of giving wrong information. So what controls have you built into your product that help us manage the governance and the transparency? And then finally, how about liability? If a mistake is made, if the LLM gives one of our employees wrong information, and that information is used and downstream that results in a lawsuit, what liability does the vendor share as being the source of that first domino of wrong information that was given? So those are some of the things. And again, I think there are things we probably would be asking even 10 years ago pre-AI, but they probably apply even more, and there's more risk because of the scale at which these can allow us to operate.
That's good. What about you, Grimes? What do you think?
Yeah, and I agree with all that. I think other pieces to this too is, you want to ask about obviously data privacy, security. You want to ask about the encryption of the data. Is there any part of the process the data is not encrypted as it kind of moves through its process from gathering to providing an answer? Also, who owns the data and the output when the answer is there, especially if there is proprietary information that you're including into maybe a closed LLM or into whatever it is you purchase. Data ownership is really huge. I mean, as we're moving into this next part of the technological world, data is now a currency. It's traded on the black market. It is highly sought after. So data ownership is going to be a really big question as we go into this new age of AI. But ultimately, my recommendation from an HR standpoint and from a tech standpoint would be to have someone at your company, if this is a road that you want to go down, really become a subject matter expert. I mean, there's so much information out there right now. AI is the new trending toy, which means there's hundreds of YouTube videos and from reputable people. There's networking groups. There's all sorts of classes. Lawyers are having a field day with hosting seminars about how to integrate AI into business and what the legal landscape looks like. I would delegate one person in the company to just become the subject matter expert. AI, understand how it works, understand the legal landscape. utilize those resources, network with other people. So that way, when you're going and shopping for vendors, you're not just going into ChatGPT and saying, what question should I ask? Like, have their meaning behind the question, because you have to understand the answer that they give you. I can ask, are you compliant with GDPR and CCPA and HIPAA? And if they say, yes, we're compliant with this, this, and this, but this is how we do it, but I don't understand the answer, that's no good to me. So really having a dedicated SME and someone who understands how AI works, I think is going to be key if this is something that you are taking your company in terms of direction.
Awesome. Good stuff.
Chris, one more thing that comes to mind on that too, that is right out of our own Puzzle experience here at Puzzle, working with some vendors who are pitching AI solutions. I think it really ultimately, what you're after is an ROI, right? And I think the best way we have found to do that is not to just let the vendor lead with their demo, their prefab demo of how this tool can help you, but generate real use cases from within your company. Like we have at Puzzle, we get them real puzzle business problems to solve to which we know we can attach a known ROI if we can get more efficient or a higher in our quality or service level. And ask them to do kind of a bake-off. Ask the vendors, both of you take this problem and show me how you're going to fix and approach one of my specific problems, as opposed to the demo problem that you solve for whenever you're selling your product to other companies.
I think that's really good advice. I'm sorry, Brad, I interrupt you, Grimes.
No. I love that Joe said that. Like, it immediately makes me think of, I don't know how many of you own an Amazon Alexa, right? When Alexa came out, there was all these things that she could do, and they demoed, and now I would say probably, I would bet 80% of the population, she's a glorified timer and keeps your grocery list, right? Because if you don't go in to technology with a purpose behind why you're getting it, you default to the easiest use case, the thing that you're going to use, and then you really kind of miss on the opportunities for it to be used the way it was originally intended. So I love that you said that, because that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah, I mean, that it really is. I think Alexa is a great example of a solution in search of a problem, right?
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
I'm just glad that Grimes told me that it can now do more for me than give me today's weather.
It can do a lot. You have to dive into it. And if you didn't buy it with that in mind, I mean, the research alone, you can spend hours down the Alexa, spiral. And she just got a new upgrade and a new voice, and now there's all these new things. I'm like, I ain't got time to learn this. You're just gonna keep being my cooking timer and my grocery list. This is how we're gonna do this.
That fascinating. I did not. I never thought of. I know we have an Alexa, but it is always off. It's not. We don't use it. It's just sitting there underneath the television. Joe, you mentioned, so one thing for the audience. I don't know if everyone. We're dropping some terminology out there. Just for the audience, you mentioned hallucinations. So just if you could explain to everyone what a hallucination is, and give us an example.
Yeah, sure. So these large language models, which are your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, that's the class of technology that these are under, the large language models. They are basically trained, and not to oversimplify it, but they really have just read everything figuratively that's on the internet and it's ever been written. That's their charm. That's their talent. They've ingested everything, and they have a perfect photographic memory. And so they're very capable of conversing through chats and answering questions very quickly, that previous to now, you'd have to get a room full of experts or spend a lot of research time doing. One of the risks with an LLM that is trained to ingest all of this information is very often it's ingesting information from all different sources, some trusted and some not. Some could just be somebody's personal blog, or they're writing what they think on a certain topic. And hallucinations are when that information can get mixed up in coming back to you as a response to your question, and a wrong answer can be given. And that could have a lot of reasons for being wrong. That's called a hallucination.
Mm.
And sometimes the answer that comes back, once in a while, this doesn't happen too often anymore, but won't even be directly related to the question you're answering or you're asking. So these hallucinations are at the end of the day when the LLM gives an answer that is not accurate or not right based on the question that you're asking. And sometimes it is yes when the answer should be no. And that's why users have to be savvy enough to vet whatever comes back. Sometimes even questioning the LLM. If you know something not to be true, you can say, I think you're wrong. Can you double check that? But really, I think the best guidance that's always been given is never use information that you get from these tools without validating it and vetting it with experts and taking that extra due diligence step to make sure it's not a hallucination.
Yeah, that's great. That goes to something, Brianna, that you said earlier, where you know, they're built to please, right? So they want to please you, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you two examples of a hallucination. One happened to me and one happened to an attorney. We'll start with the attorney. The attorney that went to ChatGPT and basically had ChatGPT write a brief, and it referenced case law that didn't exist. Right? So I just referenced a bunch, Joe versus the volcano or whatever, and so the judge called him out on it, like right there in court, like these precedents were never set. And for me, I was writing a blog post. This is early on in the ChatGPT days. I was writing a blog post for a puzzle on leadership, right? And actually, is an article that I was writing for LinkedIn, and it was on leadership. And I was very specific. I thought I was being very smart. I told the GPT to reference, two or three specific TED Talks that basically supported my point, right? And the article comes back. I'm reading through. I'm like, oh wow, there are really TED Talks that illustrate this point. And it gave me links and everything to it. I clicked the link. Yeah, it takes you to TED, but you get a 404 ever. The TED Talks never happened. It even named the TED Talks, right? Which was absolutely just incredible. So I think, big takeaway. Um, you really, like, to your point, Joe, is you really have to validate what you're getting out of any one of the large language models, because those hallucinations can get you into trouble. Um, so let's talk a little bit about, like, what are some use cases? What do you guys see as some use cases for leveraging AI in human resources that you think could drive like a measurable return on investment?
PG, you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think as far as, at least for the HR, I think for the HR segment, I think there's a couple of main areas where I think you can get the most ROI in including AI in your strategy, but also making sure that you stay low risk, right? So things like learning and development is huge. I think it's really, really smart to integrate AI into learning and development, creating curated learning paths for people, whether they're in a succession plan, whether they're in your leadership development, or you're just trying to help enable certain skills across your organization. I think AI brought into that is huge. Another great example is like the chatbots for HR, where you have the chatbot pull from very specific resources like your handbook, like your policies, and answer questions for employees based on that. That can cut down a lot of HR administrative work, anywhere between 30 and 50%, especially for larger companies where they have teams dedicated to just managing an HR inbox and answering questions over and over again. So that can be super helpful. It also helps the employee experience because chatbots can be available 24/7. So if one of your employees is in the ER at 2 a.m. and they have benefits questions, they don't have to wait the next day to get a response. They can go into the chat bot. It can explain to them how their plan worked and how their deductible is supposed to work and things like that. So I think chatbot is a huge one, especially for HR. L&D is the other one, and then employee engagement. For employee engagement, it's low risk because all the data, is internal, but AI can process information much faster than any human. And it can really segment data in a way that a lot of people just don't naturally have the ability to do. And so the human component of employee engagement is the action items that, leaders take, but the AI can give you that roadmap and that data. And the nice thing about that is you can have the LLM align with your company goals. So these are our company goals. These are our KPIs for the year. These are our core values. Now take this employee engagement feedback that we got and give us a roadmap that aligns with these things based on the feedback from our employees. And it just processes the data in such a quick and efficient way that you can start taking action almost immediately as a company. And it really drives forward that, hey, we're going to take action based on your feedback, and it actually is going to happen. It's not going to take 6 months to process, then you might see something a year from now. Which has always been one of the hugest problems with HR surveying, is we can never act on it fast enough because of how long it takes to digest the data and create a plan that the executive team can approve. So I think, to me, those are the top 3 areas that are super high ROI with really, really low risk, especially, like I said, as we're watching the legal landscape shake out. None of those 3 areas that I propose have anything to do with decision making, hiring, firing, anything like that. So as that legislative, battle takes place, you're still in a safe space where you can dip your feet in at the shallow end of the pool, figure out if you like AI, measure what success looks like, get feedback from your employees on how they like it, and then figure out if you want to take the next step into embedding it somewhere where there might be a little bit more risk.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a really good list, Brianna. I guess the only thing I would add to that is the way I think about AI's current state applications in HR is much like the way we think about them in software development, and they're increasingly being thought about in the legal field. They're really great assistants, an HR assistant or a legal assistant or a junior developer assistant in doing research at lightning speed and doing drafts or basic structures of things. There's probably the majority, I would say, of software engineers right now. They look at AI not as a replacement for an experienced software engineer, because it's certainly not there yet, but it is great at setting up the scaffolding on something they're going to be developing, which can save them a very significant amount of time. And then they use their nuanced skill and knowledge to bring it the rest of the way. And it's also a great reviewer. So it's a research assistant, a reviewer, a drafter of documents, and this isn't HR specific. Like I said, I think this is how probably all of us in the world are beginning to use ChatGPT personally and for our own personal lives too sometimes. But it really does, the speed it brings to that is amazing. And that's where it's making the inroads into professional circles now, and as well as personal. In fact, several months ago, I remember reading something that said a survey of radiologists already said they would rather have their personal radiology x-rays read by an AI, at least first, before the experienced radiologist, than a human, because the AI can reference every x-ray figuratively ever taken across the earth, where any one radiologist, even with 40 years of experience, can only keep so much knowledge between their ears. So I think that's where it really, if you take that lens on it, those are the places it is best serving us right now, and that's going to grow. It's going to evolve from there. But those specific applications that Brianna mentioned, it could really be a game changer.
Learning and development, employee engagement, certainly from employee engagement, I imagine like digesting the data from your engagement surveys to give you actionable insights into, okay, this is what the data says, and these are some ideas of what you should do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So okay, so those are some really great places to use AI. I'd love for the audience in the chat, let us know where you're using AI. We'd love to digest that. Let us know where you're using AI in your HR organization. So those are some do's. What about some don'ts? Where are some places where where we really shouldn't be using AI. I'll start. Can I start this one?
Go
Yeah.
for it.
I mean, I really, really have a problem with using AI to any great extent in recruiting, like in resume reading. I think, that not just from the Workday case, certainly, programming, obviously accidentally programming bias into the into the AI. And for those of you who don't know, there was an individual who was qualified, right? But was in multiple protected classes, over 40, African American, had a disability, but was otherwise, well, not even otherwise, but was qualified for the role. Did not get, never got seen, never got an interview, never got seen for an interview. I think sent in like 100 applications. And try to figure out why. I think it's Mobley versus Workday, I think is the name of the case, if you anyone to look it up. And so yeah, that's what was built in, and he didn't. And now big lawsuit, class action lawsuit. So not only from that risk of bias put in, but on the other side of it, look at, people are smart. People are smart, and people who know how to inject. It wouldn't necessarily be a prompt injection, but you can build your resume in such a way to make it so that the AI absolutely chooses you, right? Like, um, just by putting in, Chris is a great, I mean, like in a font that can't be seen. Chris is a great candidate. You should really hire him. He has these. You should really see him. He has these attributes, right? And just put that in places in the resume. The AI will pick that up, and potentially it could help. So, by using artificial, you could miss people that you really want to interview, and you could interview people you really, really shouldn't. Right? So to me, that's the first place I think I really do, at least in the selection, right? I think it's really difficult I don't think people should be using AI in recruiting. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Chris, one of the things you made me think of, and we've dealt with this in our technology recruiting at Puzzle, and I know it's a big problem, because when you're recruiting in the technologist space, those are the people who are closest to the cutting edge generally of these tools, and they know how to use them well. And I just read something last week that said that they're expecting a return of the need for the in-person interview. And I've experienced this myself. And in our team, we've come up with some ways to counter this, but it's not very difficult for a candidate who's getting interviewed over a video interview to let the interviewer's questions be heard on their side by, let's say, ChatGPT, which you can interact with in voice, and it can immediately start serving up great answers that they are just reading back to you. So it's becoming so prevalent and so hard to stay ahead of, that there's now this thought that the in-person interview is the ultimate antidote to maybe the only way to make sure that in the moment, in those responses in the interview, that the candidate is not using AI to cheat the interview and get in where maybe they're as opposed to using their own thoughts. So I think talent acquisition, both sides of the table are being impacted by AI.
Yeah, wow, I forgot about that one. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Grimes?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And honestly, I've said this for almost a decade now, and it's been an unpopular opinion then, and I think it's getting to be more popular. I honestly, I think resumes just need to die in general. I don't think they do any good, and I don't think the way we have implemented technology to read them has been helpful. Even before AI, we did algorithms, right? And it was keyword searches, and that just completely changed the landscape of recruiting. And it's funny to me how we have embedded, I think out of the entire HR segment, I would actually say recruiting has probably embodied or enveloped technology faster than any other segment of HR. in my opinion. I think they're the first to kind of adopt it because there's so much to recruiting. And it's funny how recruiting has been so heavily impacted by technology going back to algorithm days. And yet now we're going back to a place where we value employee referrals over what the tech is giving us. We're going back to the human component because the tech isn't working. And our best employees are usually employee referrals. So I've always, to me, I think recruiting is just one of those things that I feel like kind of just needs a technology overhaul. I think the resume just needs to go away completely. I think I would love to see AI utilized to just, why not interview everybody? You know, skip the whole resume piece. Everybody gets an opportunity to interview with AI. It can process buckets of information. You know, it can take information from your LinkedIn post and, you know, things that are of your supposed to be of your professional, you know, life. And I don't know. I have very strong opinions about recruiting. I mentor people that are struggling to find jobs where they get fired and laid off. And over the last 10 years, it has taken a lot longer to get people jobs because the algorithm is changing or the process is changing or they use this ATS instead of this one and this one has nuances. And even as an HR professional trying to mentor people and help them get back into the workforce, it's hard even for me to keep up. And it's just, I think it's an area where we have overcomplicated tech, and tech is no longer servicing that area of HR in the way that I think it needs to. And I think it just overall, as an industry, I think we need to overhaul it. There's got to be something.
Well, if we can get rid of the resume, if we could get rid of the annual review as well, that would be spectacular. So whoever's in charge of that in the HR universe, somebody tell Johnny Taylor that we don't want to do that anymore. So funny story. So a couple of years ago, this was just before we released our Employee Direct Connect service with our AI enabled chatbot. I was at the HR Tech Expo or the HR Tech Conference in Vegas, and when you go, you check boxes of you check box when you register the booth. You check boxes of like what you do as a company, and I checked AI because at the time the marketing campaign that we were running was, our AI is better than your AI. Actual intelligence is better than artificial intelligence. Because that was kind of like our tagline. So I checked, being cheeky, I checked the AI box. And I had all these private equity guys coming up to me, coming up to the booth and asking about our AI. And I'm like, oh, it's actual intelligence, not artificial intelligence. And one guy got really, really angry at me. And one of the other our other vice, Rebecca Burbridge, was there, and she had to pull the guy away and say, no, it's marketing, it's actual intelligence. Anyway, so AI plus AI, good. AI alone, artificial intelligence alone, not really that good at all. So anyway, that's my funny story. That's my comic relief. Sorry to those of you who are listening. That made me laugh because I still think about that to this day, as a matter of fact. Where else should we absolutely make sure to stay away from AI in the HR world?
Yeah.
Man. Go ahead, Brianna.
No, I was just gonna say, I think kind of we've already talked about it a little bit, and I don't want to harp on it too much, but I think anything regarding employment decisions, right? Hiring, firing, how to handle an LOA, anything that is heavily regulated at the federal or the state level, I would make sure that you are consulting with someone with experience, whether that's an HR consultant if you're a client of PuzzleHR, or a legal consultant if you have a lawyer, that is at your disposal. Anytime you are making a unique employment relations decision, and this is something that I think I would estimate almost any HR person will agree with me. Anyone who has ever trained a new HR person, the reason it's not a learn from the experience is because there are nuanced parts of any employee relations issue that changes how you address the issue. And it's not as simple as if A do B, if A and B do C. Like, there's not a logic to it all the time, because there's past precedent, there's state law, there's federal law, and then there's your own company precedent. And regardless of how good your handbook and your policies are, the one thing that your LLM will never have access to is your company precedent, how you've handled issues in the past, what your company culture, how they interpret those policies. And so anytime we train a new HR person in some of my past companies, it's taken sometimes 6 months to a year for them to understand how our HR culture operates. Because yes, we have the confines of the laws, but you also have a lot of flexibility within HR. People think that HR is so rigid and structured. That's more on the union side. Unions are majorly structured. You have no flexibility within a union. If you're just practicing human resources outside of a labor contract, there's a lot of flexibility. And I think teaching an LLM or any AI chatbot to understand those nuances of your company, we're not there yet. So anything regarding those types of decisions that has in one hand law and in the other hand your culture and your company and past precedent, I would just say stay away. Maybe use AI as like a, hey, what are the state websites that govern this type of situation, and then do your own research, and then take it to your consultant. Use it as a tool, but I would not rely solely on AI to make those type of decisions. Not right now. We're not there yet.
Yeah, that's good feedback, Joe.
Yeah, I was initially thinking of employee relations too. Just can't say it nearly as eloquently as Brianna did, and with her level of expertise. So I agree with that. I think the danger here is going too fast with this in conversations where trust is formed and shaped and expectations are formed and shaped. As Brianna just said, there is, in a lot of those conversations, there's even more art than science. And by art, I mean just the experience and the nuance and knowing how to handle those because you've done it before. And these technologies, in my opinion, are just not to be trusted with that right now. We touched on it earlier. There was a recent article written by a guy, and the headline was, "I was doing well with my OCD therapy until I found ChatGPT." And the reason for that was he was working with a real therapist, making what he called real progress. And then he started using ChatGPT, dabbling in that. And it was so self-validating. Every thought he had, everything he did, even the things that he wanted to cure and work out of his behavior, it validated. It told him he was right. So he started going to the therapist less, ChatGPT more, because it said, "You're fine just the way you are." And this was someone who recognized something in himself and was seeking treatment. And he was smart enough to know, I'm going backwards here. So I think in those types of interactions where you're talking about human emotions, human expectations, and we're not ready for that yet. That is the domain that I would still leave to the HR pros. I mean, obviously, like all technologies, we're in the first inning of this thing and barely through the top of the first inning. So all of these things we're talking about as obstacles and problems are going to be worked out, just like they were going from the early internet to now, from early mobile technology to now. But right now, just as Brianna said, the risk is way too high in some of these areas for employee engagement and just for the well-being of employees and their satisfaction with their jobs and their lives to trust to these new, fledgling technologies.
That's awesome. We're coming to the top of the hour. So let's kind of put a bow around this conversation, if we could, or bottom of the hour, whatever you want to call it. Our time's almost up. We're at 50 minutes. If this were a therapy session, it would be over. But we have a couple minutes left. Let's like I said, put a bow on this. Places that AI today, a great use case. I think we said employee using it for employee engagement, right? You take surveys and it can kind of help you ideate in what you take your surveys, you feed that into your LLM, help you ideate in things that you can do in your organization to get better employee engagement. Use it to draft frameworks, right? So you can use it to help you draft an offer letter, help you draft a policy, right, that you can take back and review. So use it there to help you go faster. Perhaps you could ask, if you could, the chatbot functionality, Grimes, that you talked about, right? If it's you've got your LLM trained on your policies, your procedures, benefits, etc. Are we off on Thursday? That doesn't need to be a phone call to a manager. That can be a chat to a chatbot, and you can get the answer. Low risk, high return. With all that said, I also want to say, having your own LLM, right, hosted on your server or whatever, your own instance of wherever you're putting this thing, right, is probably the safest way from a privacy perspective, right? You don't want to put all this stuff out on ChatGPT or Google LM or Claude or what have you. Certainly a bad idea. Even though you can click on the "Don't share my conversation," you can certainly click that button. But I mean, let's be honest, right? Who knows? They're probably going to use your information. But I think I would have to I would guess where not to use it. Any sort of employee hiring or firing decision, right? Always you can always get you in trouble. Don't use it. Don't use it as the be all end all, right? Use it as a tool. Even though your chat GPT is really nice to you and thinks you're the smartest person ever, it is you've got to see it as a tool, not as the artisan, right? AI plus AI, artificial intelligence plus actual intelligence get you a whole lot farther and probably keep you out of court well than just using AI alone. There's one thing that I think, Brian, I think you mentioned this as a use case. And I think this is coming in the future. I've seen some examples of this. Predictive attrition models. So predictive attrition modeling, right? So, there are AI tools out there that kind of watch, take the metadata over your employee force and they tell you, say, hey, this person or these people might be the next ones to leave. So you might want to do something to kind of to stop that from happening. I think that's coming in the future. And I also think that there's like a learning path, right? Where I'm looking to hire an HR business partner in Tampa, but they're really expensive. I can't afford an HR business partner. What's the position that generally people had before that, right? Maybe that's an HR administrator, HR coordinator. And so maybe I can hire that person for less money, not get an HR, and then train them to become an HR business. And so I think AI can actually help with finding that person and creating that learning path that you mentioned earlier, Grimes. That was what I was trying to bring up. So did I leave anything out?
I don't think so, Chris. You did remind me of a couple things, I think, from a practical perspective that people in our audience can do to control and mitigate the real risks that there are around this new technology. And a lot of the IT shops at these companies probably have already thought about, but maybe not. You can control through your allow and disallow internet filtering what LLMs your employees can go to from your network and which ones they can't. And that's definitely worth looking into. And as Chris said, you've got to write a policy early on that specifically states under no circumstances use any sensitive information with these tools where that data is traveling over the internet, whether it's encrypted or unencrypted. As Chris said, it's going on servers somewhere else. Within the last month, some of the things that were fed into some of the chats that were created with some of these LLMs were exposed on Google. So there is risk. There's a lot we don't know, and there are some low-hanging fruit steps that you can take to control your company's exposure to these tools. And I then think it's, as Chris said, if there's an LLM in your future, and I think there probably is, it's best right now to host it yourself, because then you get all types of layers of controls to mitigate these risks, make it work for you in your specific company context, and keep your private data private.
Thanks.
I think if I could just close with one more thing, I just want to encourage people, to thine own self be true. If you are not a company that is on the cutting edge of tech every time it comes out, like we live in such a world of FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Don't feel like you're going to get left behind. I think of when apps first came out on mobile devices. Everyone was trying to make an app and half of them failed and half of them was too complicated. And now it's gotten a lot easier. It's more user friendly. It's more cost effective. A lot of companies adapted after the fact. So I would just say, know your company, know your audience, know your employees. Don't try to jump into something that they're not going to be open to, that's not going to help you, it's going to create more trouble than it's worth. If you're not comfortable with it, wait it out, see what happens. Don't feel like you have to jump on the AI bandwagon. If you're unsure, take a beat. You're not going to get left behind. I think AI is going to be a part of our future, but how it's going to be part of our future, I think we're still unfolding.
Actual intelligence all day long. Brianna, Joe, thank you so much for the discussion. We could go on for hours, obviously, about this stuff, but thanks for joining us today for this discussion. AI and HR audience, thank you very much for your time and attention, and for joining us. And of course, follow us on all our socials. LinkedIn is probably the best place to follow us. We're on the Facebook and we're on the Instagram as well. But be sure to follow us on Instagram and our YouTube channel for where you will be able to see this webinar in the near future if you ever want to come back and visit with it again. But again, thank you for your time today. We appreciate you, and we look forward to solving HR puzzles with you in the very near future. Take good care. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.